let's be honest with ourselves here, because that is a large part of the channel. I think for nearly all of us, there is that one brand, maybe even that specific model or perhaps exact car that doesn't really make any sense, but you just can't stop thinking about it. For a lot of people, something like Alfa Romeo might really typify what I'm talking about, but for me, it's Subaru. I've only owned one. It was an Impreza WRX, a bug-eye, so an early 2000s car. It was a nightmare to own, yet I still keep thinking about buying a Subaru to this very day. And if you're watching from abroad, Subaru in the UK really is not quite dead, but really mostly dead. It doesn't make any sense here. They're not especially cheap cars, they're not especially nice inside, they're generally fairly thirsty, and they have a reputation amongst those who love them for being somewhat unreliable. You've also got a somewhat more fundamental issue, which is the fact that 20 years ago you could go and buy yourself an Impreza that would be reasonably cheap, have about 300 horsepower when a Golf GTI might have had 150 to 180 and a Ferrari would have only had maybe 380, and you would have got yourself into a real bona fide rally homologation car, or near enough, and it would be serious value for money. 20 years on, well, the Golf now has 300 horsepower, Ferraris have 700, but the Subaru still has about 300. They've grown, they've got a little bit more expensive. The saloon went away, was replaced with the hatch that I actually have something of a soft spot for, and then they reintroduced the saloon. In America, by all accounts, it still does remarkably well even to this day. Yet here, seeing a Subaru of this generation is extremely unusual. When you look at a car like this and you see that on paper it doesn't really deliver any more performance than one of 20 years ago, I think it doesn't take a genius to work out why these are such a rare sight. But is there a reason to buy a car like this? Should you consider one? I've often thought about getting one of these as a daily, and I've never sort of quite managed to pull the trigger. If for no other reason, they still command a certain premium. An example like this low mileage, less than 10,000, 2017 car can be had for about 25 grand. And I want to say a big thank you to its owner, Neil, for bringing it up to me. Incidentally, he did not put the stickers on it, the dealership did. So many things about this are very old-fashioned. The interior is definitely a step up in quality and technology over the cars of old, but then so it should be. 2 decades have passed. If you're used to, say, a modern pretty much anything, this isn't really going to be very impressive. Plenty of sort of scratchy plastics. You got little bits of vinyl and stuff here and there, but overall this doesn't really look or feel especially upmarket. Perhaps worst of all is the fact that up front you still have the 2.5 litre flat 4 boxer. Now it might sound like exactly the kind of thing you'd expect, courtesy of this car's one and only modification, which is a nameless back box. Not nameless as in no brand, that's actually what it's called. But that engine, the 2.5, has a reputation for fragility, which sadly is well earned. The 2-litre Subaru engines were, generally speaking, quite a bit more robust, particularly the ones in Japanese market cars, which in the top-end vehicles were always forged from factory, and those have got a great reputation amongst the tuner community for being pretty strong and, well, fairly flexible. These, no. And they still use this engine. They've been using it for, 2 decades. And there have been about 4 class action lawsuits over them in America because they just fail. And they fail without modification. They fail on standard power. And it's not a cheap thing to fix, really, nor is there actually that much you can really do about it. You've just got to hope that yours doesn't go pop. But there is plenty of good news, because whilst this car may be quite old school in many ways that aren't so good, it's also old school in many ways which really are. It sounds great, doesn't it? I mean, let's be honest here. I know for some this may be the noise that heralds the imminent arrival of a moron, but for me, this is an absolutely iconic soundtrack, and I think they've actually judged the volume of this car just about right. I'd probably have it like a few decibels quieter, but it's not obnoxious. I've known quite a few Subarus to be far louder than this. This I really like. Visibility is actually pretty good. The A and B pillars are well placed and not that thick. The 6-speed gearbox is absolutely delightful. This was always a highlight of Subarus because the gearbox is right there, not really much between you and it. The steering, I'm also delighted to say, seems vastly improved over some of the older cars. That was always a Subaru weakness, and an area where the Mitsubishi Evo was just vastly better. See, the old Subarus, they always had plenty of grip, but there was just no feeling through the thing. It just it went around the bend, but didn't involve you much in the process, or I never felt that way about them. But this, you can tell, is talking to you. So when we get onto my favourite B road in just a moment, we're going to find out just how good she is. There's also, compared with the last Scooby I drove, a few more technological upgrades. So you have different modes for the throttle. I'm in the medium one at the moment, which I'm told is probably the best. And you've also got the driver-controlled center differential, which I've left in auto because I think Subaru know what they're doing, but it means that you can send the power manually either further forwards or to the back. That's pretty trick. Subaru have always been very proud of their symmetrical all-wheel drive system, and rightly so. It is, by all accounts, a very good system. If you are thinking of one of these as a daily driver, you've got both good and bad. Maybe the best bit is the fact that although room in the back's decent, boot space is fabulous. Lots of space back there. Very impressed with that, actually. Fuel economy, though, not so good. Also a common Subaru weakness, but you're getting into a 2.5 litre turbocharged old-school car. Now, this vehicle's owner has fluctuated between 4-cylinder turbo cars and big V8s a number of different times, but always found himself returning to one of these because there's just something about them he can't get away from, and I understand totally why. The stickers, though, I do think need to go. It's quite odd getting in a car of this age actually and finding real dials in it. Everyone's going towards digital displays now, and they're very classic Japanese with the red backlight and a little central display that does give you some useful information about your driving modes, your diff and fuel economy and all that jazz. Up here you even have a little sort of, I guess, mini version of what many GTRs have, which will tell you all the stuff you want to know, like how much boost you've got, and pretty sure you can muck around with that as well. Yeah, different modes. Here you go, you got clock. And this car's been averaging 25.8 to the gallon. That's actually, it's about right for something like this. Neil's last car was a Mustang 5 litre, and you're going to probably get pretty similar MPG out of something like that. So, nearly standard Subaru Impreza WRX STI versus British windy B road. If there is anywhere on earth this car is going to work, it's here. So let's see if she's still got some of the old magic. She really does. Now, this isn't the fastest thing down this road. In fact, a standard Subaru hasn't been the fastest thing down this road since about 1999. But what it is absolutely fabulous. And it's kind of like revisiting an old album with your new stereo. And you realise that actually, that sounded quite good, didn't it? You thought it just probably sounded like trash because it had been recorded in a hotel corridor. And actually, they seemed to know what they were doing. Now, you had to be careful with it because, as with many Subarus, it's the front end that wants to wander first. But there's a dance you can have with this car. And as you can tell, she likes to tango. and I'm enjoying it. Now, the steering is still not perfect. In fact, it's still far away from an Evo, which of course will be this car's natural predator. Not that Mitsubishi were making an Evo by 2017. I'm pretty sure they were long gone even by then. The power does come in fairly late, actually. It's only really, I mean, let's try it. Let's get to sort of 2,000 RPM. Yeah, there's nothing. It's 2.5 to 3 where this car actually comes alive. And on a road like this, the car just works. It's not actually that big. It's very well sized for this kind of road. And you have to be in the mood for it too, because with this old school turbo, if you were just say going to put this in 6 and you expect it to just be able to pull along, no, nothing's going to happen. You put your foot down and it's got zilch. My 1 Series with the old BM straight 6 in it would just absolutely go away from this car at 1500 RPM. But that's not what it's all about. You've got to get this into the right kind of gear and then it flies. I recently drove the BMW 230i, which in theory should be a similar sort of thing. A bit less power, like 260 versus roughly 300 here. But it's a 2 litre, it's a 2.5, 4-cylinder turbocharged car with a sort of much more modern engine. That, no, not even remotely close to replicating the magic that this thing truly does still have. Because the moment you get on it, you forget, you ignore all of this crap down here. It just doesn't mean anything. Now, although the steering may not have masses of texture and feedback, and it's perhaps a little touch light for my liking, it's certainly precise, and the car does exactly what you want it to. Now, these seats aren't the best ever. In fact, I think I preferred the ones I got in my old Bug-Eye, but they're all right. They do the job for sure, and they allow you to feel a fair amount of the road. Now, this car is actually stiffer than I thought it might be. At low speeds, it's not a punishing ride, far from it, but neither is it especially cosseting. So if you want a long-distance cruiser, this is not the right car. Makes too much noise, drinks too much fuel, although it is decent on storage space. Chassis just turns in so well. You put your foot in and then you can feel the car working under you. And this is not a computer game to drive at all. If you're just a moron, you will crash this car. It's not going to help you that much. Yes, it's got computer controlled differentials and it's shuffling the power around and all that sort of stuff, but then so does a modern Nissan GTR. And believe me, those are not an anodyne driving experience at all. Yeah, still reasonably laggy. But with a car like this, I find a huge amount of forgiveness for that kind of stuff, because this is where it is part of the character, it's part of the charm. And I know it's an incredibly hypocritical thing of me to say, isn't it? Because if I drove another car that had lag like this, like for example, the Porsche 718 Cayman I tested recently, that is a definite fault, because that's not what that car should be like. That car should be all about the response. This is about a different type of mechanical engagement. Once you get that engine on the boil, which is above 3, it's a delightful thing. Oh, it turns in really keen. I mean, like Alfa Romeo kind of keenness here. This car actually feels pretty well put together. I do laugh at the real old school touches, like the motion sensors that are still here, a whole bunch of other things in this car that really most others left behind 10 years ago, but I just don't care. I really don't. Something like a Mercedes A45 AMG, I'm pretty sure is a lot quicker than this. Got more technology in it, it's newer, people seem to be into that sort of thing these days, but I never ever enjoyed driving one of those anywhere near as much as I'm enjoying driving this right now. The last hatchback that I drove was a bit older than this. It was from about 2009 or so. It left me feeling very cold, because actually it was really quite the opposite. It was very squishy, very woolly, and didn't really reward at all. It wasn't an exciting car. It didn't feel very dynamic. It felt like it was just a pudding. It really was. This is a much sharper vehicle, actually surprisingly so. I didn't think this would be like this at all. So why don't we buy these anymore? It's simple, really. Most of us have moved on. Yes, this car's great. It's a hell of a throwback, and it's a wonderful thing to experience, but I think for the vast majority of customers, this was great when they were new, but they've been there, they've done that, they've grown up, their needs have changed, they want something more economical, more spacious, more reliable. Subaru kind of stuck to their guns, and unfortunately, if you already have something like, say, a Golf R, that kind of thing, I can see how you'd probably think that this in many ways was a bit of a backward step, because you're going to be getting less performance in some cases, and with greater running costs and reliability woes. It's a shame really, because actually at its core this is still a blindingly enjoyable car. Brakes pretty decent, gearbox excellent, steering not perfect but vastly improved. Not quite so keen on the way that these look. I don't really think that they're a sensational car like the old ones were. These stickers, I think, would have to go. But as an unusual offbeat daily, if you can put up with its quirks, there is certainly a reward for doing so. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks all for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I shall see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.